She didn't roar. She didn't bare her teeth or charge. She simply stood there, less than 20 feet away, her chest rising in slow, tired breaths, eyes locked on his, not with threat, but with something far more haunting, desperation. The lioness wasn't there to hunt. She was there to beg. Michael had spent years in the wild, treating animals others had given up on, but nothing, not the bloodied rhinos, not the orphaned elephants, had ever made him freeze like this. Because beside her, trembling and barely upright, was a cub, tiny, weak, its ribs pressed against its thin golden skin like branches under tension. And with a quiet nudge of her nose, the lioness urged it forward. Time stopped. The cub staggered a few steps, legs folding under its weight, and then collapsed in the dirt. The lioness didn't flinch. She didn't come closer. She didn't leave. She just looked at him, an exhausted mother, trusting a man she'd never met with the only thing she had left. Michael had no weapon in hand, no backup. Every rational thought told him to back away slowly, avoid eye contact, retreat. But he didn't move, because something inside him cracked the moment that cub hit the ground. Not out of fear, out of knowing. He had seen that look before, not from animals, but from people. The way his wife looked at him the day the doctor said there was nothing more to try. That silent pleading in the eyes of someone who loves too deeply to let go. The lioness's gaze never wavered, and that's when he realized this wasn't a scene from a documentary. This wasn't nature being majestic or wild or untamed. This was one living being asking another for kindness. No roar, no words, just a choice. And Michael made it. He didn't remember deciding to move. One moment he was staring, frozen in place, and the next he was kneeling beside the cub, hands hovering just above its fragile body. Its breathing was shallow, its eyes half closed. He could feel the heat radiating off its little frame. Too hot, fever, dehydration, starvation, a combination that usually didn't end well in the wild. Behind him, the lioness remained still, watching, silent, not a twitch of her tail, not a growl. Her trust was unnerving. It felt unnatural. Or maybe it was something deeper, something earned not through years, but in the quiet recognition of need. Michael spoke softly, not to her, not even really to the cub, but to himself. "Easy now, I've got you." His voice cracked. It had been a long time since he'd said those words to anyone. He lifted the cub with both hands, cradling it gently, its body limp and burning with fever. It didn't resist. It didn't even seem to notice. His legs moved on autopilot, carrying him toward the shaded outpost that doubled as his shelter and field clinic, a place not meant for this. He wasn't equipped to handle large predators, especially not their young. There was no protocol, no contingency plan for this kind of situation. He kept glancing over his shoulder. The lioness had followed. Not close, just enough to see. She stood at the edge of the trees, eyes tracking his every move. The message was clear. "I'm trusting you. Don't fail me." Inside the shelter, he laid the cub on a blanket, heart hammering in his chest. He grabbed the emergency kit, his fingers clumsy but focused. Oral rehydration solution, antibiotics, gauze. Nothing was measured for a lion. He guessed, adjusted, improvised. This wasn't how he worked anymore, not since Leah. He had left the front lines after she died, stopped taking chances, stopped fighting the battles no one saw. She was the brave one, the one who ran toward suffering while he pulled back. But now, holding this dying cub with the lioness waiting just beyond the trees, something old sparked to life in him. Purpose, maybe, or guilt, or maybe it was love disguised as duty. Whatever it was, it made him stay. The first night was the longest Michael had endured in years. The cub, barely more than fur, bones, and shallow breath, lay curled on a bed of soft towels under a weak heating lamp he rigged with a flashlight and aluminum foil. He'd given him fluids, antibiotics, and a name, Nuru, meaning light. It came without much thought, but once he said it, it felt right. There was something fragile but luminous about the little thing, like a candle struggling not to flicker out. Michael stayed beside him, eyes heavy, body stiff from kneeling on the concrete floor. Every few minutes, he'd check the cub's chest, counting the rise and fall. It was uneven, labored. He tried feeding him with a syringe, goat milk diluted to mimic what his mother might have given, but Nuru barely had the strength to swallow. He adjusted the position of the heat lamp again. Too close, and the cub could overheat. Too far, and he'd slip further away. Every decision felt like a balancing act between instinct and desperation. At some point in the early morning hours, Nuru let out a weak cry. Just a whimper, really, but it hit Michael like a thunderclap. He hadn't heard a sound all night. The cry meant pain, but it also meant fight. "You're still here," Michael whispered, blinking back something in his eyes that wasn't just fatigue. He reached out, gently resting a hand on the cub's back. "Good, that's good." He didn't sleep, he didn't eat. The world outside the shelter faded. No texts, no radio calls, no distractions. Just the rhythmic buzz of the heat lamp, the faint rustle of Nuru's breathing, and Michael's quiet voice murmuring words of encouragement that the cub likely couldn't hear, but that he needed to say. In those moments, Michael wasn't a broken man. He wasn't a widower hiding from the world, or a field vet afraid to risk again. He was just a human trying to save something small and helpless. He was present, fully, painfully, purposefully. When dawn finally crept across the edge of the horizon, painting the shelter in soft gold, Nuru was still breathing. Barely, but still. And that was enough for Michael to keep going. Each morning, like clockwork, she came. Michael would step out of the shelter, stretch his stiff back and find her standing at the tree line. Always the same distance, always silent. The lioness never crossed into the open, never approached. But she never left either. She just watched. Sometimes she sat, other times she paced slowly, but her eyes never strayed from the door of the shelter. Michael knew what she was doing. She was waiting. Not with impatience or anger, just with the quiet, aching patience only a mother could understand. Inside, Nuru was slowly stabilizing. The fever had come down. His breathing had steadied, and the second time Michael tried feeding him, he suckled weakly at the syringe. Not much, but enough to matter. Every small improvement felt like a victory. Every twitch of his ear, a sign that he wasn't done fighting. Michael began taking short breaks outside, sitting on an old wooden crate near the clearing. He started talking to her, soft, careful words that weren't meant to calm her, but to acknowledge her. "I know you want him back," he said one afternoon, watching her tail flick as the wind stirred the grass. "But he's not ready, not yet." He held up the old cloth Nuru had been sleeping on. She lifted her head slightly, ears twitching, eyes sharp and unblinking. He didn't expect her to understand the gesture, but something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or just shared longing. It tore at him. Every instinct as a vet said the cub needed more time. But every moment Nuru stayed here, the risk of imprinting grew. If he got too used to human contact, he'd lose his instincts. He'd be as good as lost in the wild. Still, releasing him too soon could kill him. It was a decision with no clear answer. And yet, the lioness never once showed aggression. She waited, day after day, as if she too understood that her cub was safer here for now. That evening, as the sun sank low, Nuru opened his eyes fully for the first time. He blinked at Michael, then at the warm halo of light above him. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He simply looked. And in that gaze, Michael felt the weight of the lioness's trust pressing on his shoulders. He couldn't fail, either of them. A week later, the silence broke. Michael had just finished cleaning Nuru's feeding bowl when Amina's voice crackled over the old two-way radio he'd left untouched for days. "Michael, are you there? You've gone dark. We're heading to your post." His stomach sank. He hadn't meant to shut the world out. It just happened. Time blurred when your days revolved around monitoring breaths, mixing milk, and whispering comfort into a dim shelter. He responded with a curt update, hoping to hold off the inevitable. It didn't work. The next afternoon, a dust-covered Jeep rumbled into the clearing, tires crunching on dry grass. Amina stepped out, blinking into the sun. She was younger than Michael by 20 years, sharp-eyed, resourceful, and not one to let things slide. She took one look at the cub curled in the crate behind him and froze. "Is that?" Her voice trailed off. Michael nodded. "She brought him to me." Amina's mouth opened, then closed. She stepped closer, her gaze shifting from the cub to the tree line, where, true to pattern, the lioness stood watching. "You're serious?" "She trusted me," he said quietly, and I couldn't ignore that. The news spread quickly. Within 2 days, a representative from the Wildlife Authority showed up, along with a senior vet from Nairobi. Opinions flew like dust in the wind. Some applauded Michael's compassion, others accused him of reckless interference. The lioness was labeled a potential threat. Suggestions were made to relocate her. Some even wanted to move the cub permanently to a sanctuary. Michael stood his ground. "She didn't leave him," he said, voice firm in the face of growing pressure. "She brought him, she waited, every day. If we separate them now, we're not saving anyone. We're stealing what they already saved together." There was a pause in the room, tension thick. Then Amina stepped forward, her voice steady. "He's right. I've never seen anything like this. She's never shown aggression, never crossed the line. This isn't a wild animal losing instinct. This is a mother finding help." Together, they proposed a monitored plan. A slow, intentional reintroduction on the lioness's terms. It would be risky. It would require patience. But for the first time, the conversation shifted from protocol to empathy. The debate faded. The choice was made. They would let kindness finish what it had started. The morning of the release was still and heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Michael stood just outside the shelter, hands steady but heart pounding. Nuru nestled in a carry crate beside him, no longer limp and fragile, but alert and curious. His limbs had filled out, his coat gleamed with health, and he'd grown strong enough to walk and even play in short bursts. But this wasn't a game, this was everything. They had chosen a wide, open clearing just past the tree line where the lioness had always waited. She was there now, watching from the shadows. Still, silent, ever patient, Michael placed the crate in the middle of the field and slowly opened the door. Nuru didn't bolt. He didn't hesitate either. He stepped out carefully, paws pressing into the earth like he remembered it. He sniffed the wind. His ears twitched. And then he stopped. The lioness emerged from the trees. Michael felt his breath catch. The cub turned, ears perked, body low. For a second, there was only tension, uncertainty hanging like a thread between them. Would she recognize him? Would he recognize her? She let out a low, guttural sound, not a growl, something softer, a mother's call. Nuru's body jolted. He took a hesitant step, then another, then broke into an unsteady run. He stumbled once, righted himself, and closed the gap. She met him halfway. Her massive body lowered, and she wrapped herself around him in one fluid, instinctual motion. Her tongue groomed his fur in long, slow swipes, as if reclaiming what had always been hers. Michael blinked hard, his throat tightening. He wasn't the only one. Amina stood beside him, unmoving, hand over her mouth. And then, something even more unexpected happened. The lioness looked up. She turned her gaze toward Michael, eyes deep and gold and calm. There was no fear, no anger, no confusion, just presence. A moment of acknowledgement that defied every explanation. She didn't roar, she didn't run. She simply looked at him. And then, with her cub nestled against her, she turned and disappeared into the tall grass. No drama, no sound, just a quiet ending to a story that had never been about saving a lion. It had always been about honoring a trust that had been given, not earned. The rains had come and gone twice since that day. The land had shifted, thickened with green, then browned again under the sun's relentless weight. Life moved on, as it always did in the wild. But Michael had not forgotten. He still returned to the clearing now and then, not to intervene, not to watch with expectation, but simply to be present, to sit with his thermos of coffee at sunrise and remember a time when silence spoke louder than science, when trust walked on 4 paws and waited at the edge of the trees. It was during one of those quiet mornings that he saw them again. At first, it was just movement, a ripple in the tall grass. Then came the unmistakable silhouette of a lioness emerging from the brush. Strong, steady. She paused at the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon, her body no longer gaunt but lean and powerful. And behind her, not 1 cub, but 3. Michael's breath caught. He recognized Nuru immediately. Taller now, his coat brighter, steps more sure, but still with that slight awkwardness in his stride, his right front paw favoring the ground a second longer than the others. A remnant of his early struggle, proof of the fight he'd survived. The cubs didn't notice him at first. They play wrestled in the grass, pounced at insects, pawed at their brother with cub-like clumsiness. Nuru tolerated them, occasionally nudging them back into place with a firm but gentle swipe. Michael remained perfectly still, no camera, no journal in hand, just eyes wide and heart full. Then the lioness turned her head. She saw him, not startled, not alarmed, just aware. Their eyes met again, briefly, simply, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Memory. She did not approach. She didn't need to. She gave a quiet chuff, barely audible over the wind, and led her cubs back into the grass. Nuru lingered a moment longer, his gaze lingering on the man by the tree before turning to follow. Michael didn't move until long after they were gone. He wasn't sad. He didn't feel left behind. In fact, he felt the opposite. As if a story he thought was over had turned another page, one he hadn't expected, but one he would carry for the rest of his life. Because some bonds, no matter how wild, never truly break. The porch creaked softly as Michael leaned back in his weathered chair, the journal open on his lap. Pen paused above the page. The morning air was cool, the kind that whispered memory into the bones. A year had passed to the day. He hadn't planned anything to mark it, no ceremony, no tribute. But his hands had instinctively reached for the journal, and the words had come. She brought me her cub, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to ask for help. She didn't speak my language, but she spoke to my heart. And somehow in saving him, she saved something in me too. He exhaled, slow and steady, his eyes scanning the page, then lifting to the horizon. The grassland stretched out, golden and endless. He could almost imagine them there again, Nuru tumbling through the brush, his siblings close behind, the lioness always watching, always leading. Michael smiled faintly. He had seen things in this life that had hardened most people. Loss, cruelty, indifference. But that moment, when a wild creature crossed the divide and placed her hope in his hands, that moment had undone years of silence in his soul. Kindness had bridged the gap. Not heroics, not science, just a simple, selfless act in a moment of need. He closed the journal and stood, letting the morning sun warm his skin. He didn't know if he'd ever see them again. Maybe that wasn't the point. What mattered was that it had happened, that it was real, That trust, when met with kindness, had the power to change everything. And maybe, just maybe, someone else needed to believe that too. If this story touched your heart, imagine the impact we can create together. Michael's quiet act of compassion didn't just save a life. It reminded us all that kindness speaks louder than fear, and connection can bloom in the most unexpected places. If you believe in the power of love, second chances, and the silent bonds that heal, please subscribe and join our journey. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to light, real, raw, and full of heart. Together, let's keep kindness alive in a world that needs it more than ever.